Hello students, I am Meena Madam. Today I am going to start the last chapter of political science, that is outcomes of democracy. In this chapter we have to study about very first one is definition and features of democracy. Second, the factors that decide the outcomes of democracy. Third, the factors that are helpful to evaluate the outcomes of democracy. So let us start with the definition of democracy. Democracy is a form of government in which rulers are elected by the people. Now we have to see its features. The very first one is democracy promotes equality among citizens. One of the principles of democracy is equality. In democracy, everyone is treated equally, irrespective of their caste, religion, language, culture, etc. Second, it enhances the dignity of an individual. Democracy is only the form of government in which people are citizens, whereas in other form of the government they are only subjects. In fact, citizens means people who are having rights and duties both, whereas subjects are the people who have to follow the rules. They don't have any rights. So third one is democracy involves the quality of decision making. Since in democracy, every decision is taken after a long discussion that makes a decision impartial and in the favor of all. Fourth, democracy provides an effective and acceptable method to resolve conflicts. As in democracy, everyone is treated equally, so there is a possibility of fair solution of each and every conflict. Fifth, it is a flexible system that allows room to correct mistakes. It is only a democracy where people can change their rulers if they see that they are going against the people and the country. Now next we have to see on what factors do the outcomes of democracy depend. And these factors are very first one is social situation in a country. Second, economic achievements and level of economic development in a country. Third, nature of culture and civilization. Now, the third topic that we have to study about is factors that evaluate the outcomes of democracy. And these factors are very first one is how far does a democracy produce an accountable, responsive, and legitimate government. Here, first of all, we should know what are the features of an accountable, responsive, and legitimate government. And these are very first one is people should have right to choose their rulers. Second, people should have control over the rulers. Third, citizens should be able to participate in decision making on issues that affect them all. And democracy can produce such government as very first one is decision making in democracy is based on norms and procedures. Decision making process can't be arbitrary or influenced by the whims of the ruler. Second, decision making process is transparent. Different individuals and groups do their assigned role, and there is a mechanism in democracy to coordinate among them. Third, there are mechanisms in democracy that enable the people to participate in decision making. Fourth, there are also mechanisms in democracy that enable the citizens to hold the government accountable. Now, the second factor that is helpful to evaluate the outcomes of democracy is how far are economic inequality and poverty removes in democracy. In fact, the output of democracy in terms of achieving economic growth, equal distribution of income, and removal of poverty has not been positive. In most of the democracy, including India, economic equality has been, in fact, economic inequality has been growing. The very first one is a small number of super rich enjoy a big share of wealth and income. Second, their share in the total income of the country has been increasing. Third, people at the bottom of the society have very little share in national resources. Fourth, their income have been declining. In fact, economic inequality is common to all democracies. In most of the democracies, poor people constitute the majority, and government of such democratic country do nothing to remove inequalities and poverty. Since very first one is election is not free and fair. Money and power play an important role in election. Second, poor are generally do not organize. And it is easier to muzzle their voice. Third, the rich people have the ability and capacity to influence the pressure groups and lobbyists to work with the government on their behalf. Third factor that is helpful to evaluate the outcomes of democracy is how far does democracy accommodate social diversity. Democracy is in a better position to handle social differences, division, and conflicts. But it is possible under the following situation. Very first one is majority and minority should always work together. Majority should not try to run their authority over the minority. Second is no group should feel assured of being in majority all time. Even those in minority presently should have a chance of getting into majority. Now, the fourth factor that is helpful to evaluate the output of democracy is how far does democracy contribute to economic growth and development. Yes, in democracy, in fact, in dictatorship, first one is dictatorship have a better record than democracies in terms of their abilities to produce rapid economic growth. Second, countries under dictatorship have grown faster than the countries under democracy. Third, even the poor countries under dictatorship have recorded a faster rate of growth than the democratic countries. But people need of a legitimate, accountable and responsive government. They need right to change the rulers. If government fails to work in the interest of people and country, and dictatorship do not meet any of these needs. Now, the fifth factor that is helpful to evaluate the outputs of the democracy is how far does democracy maintain the dignity and freedom in democracy. A positive output of democracy is that it permits political equality for all of its citizens. No individual is discriminated against on the basis of caste, religion, language, culture, etc. Political equality makes every citizen enjoy dignity and freedom in democracy. If in practice this ideal situation may not always be obtained, but democracy accepts this as a matter of principle. So, it has been possible to organize a struggle and movement to achieve this. Here, one question is arise that in spite of the fact that democracies have failed to produce an accountable and responsive government, why is it that democracy is a preferred system of government? In fact, if democracy fails to produce an accountable and responsive government, but that does not take all the merits of democracy, the single biggest merit and outcome of democracy is that it produces a legitimate government. A legitimate government is one which is generally acceptable to the people, and a democratic system of free and fair election assures this outcome. If the elected legitimate government does not prove efficient and up to the mark, it will be thrown out in the next election. Here one more question is arised that decision making process is slow in democratic government. Why? In a dictatorship, decision making can be arbitrary. One person purges all the personal decision making power. He can take instant decision and implement them. His personal choice and whims influence the decisions. But in democracy, decision making follows certain norms and procedures. Different individuals and groups are assigned different tasks. They analyze the different merits and demerits of a decision. All this consumes time. That's why decision can't be instant. So decision making in democracy, very first one is takes more time. Second is more efficient and effective. And third is acceptable to all the citizens. So democracy produces a government that is accountable to the citizens and responsive to the needs and expectation of the citizens. So listen this video very carefully and write the answer of this question. Very first one is, how do you feel that a democratic government is better than a dictatorship? Second, on what factors do the outcomes of democracy depend? Third, define the democracy and mention its features. Fourth, state the factors on the basis of which one can evaluate the outcomes of democracy. Sixth, how does a democracy produce an accountable, responsive, and legitimate government? Sixth, decision making in a democratic government is slow. Comment. Seventh, in spite of the fact that democracies have failed to produce accountable and responsive government, why is it that democracy is a preferred system of government? Ninth, explain the outcomes of democracy in terms of equal distribution of income and removal of poverty. 10th, evaluate the outcomes of democracy in terms of dignity and freedom of the citizens. Next, what are the conditions under which democracy accommodates social diversity? And last one is compare democracies and dictatorship in terms of their ability to deliver fast economic growth.